All right, hi everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Student Experiences Business Spotlight. If you're new to our program, Virtual Student Experiences is a pro bono initiative spearheaded for students by students. The goal of the VSC is to give students around the world an opportunity to hear from professionals in their career industry of interest in a friendly and casual setting. For students that know what they want to do, the role of the VSC is to encourage, allow, and connect those students with professionals. Through VSC, students are given the chance to decide if their career choice fits their personality, skills, and overall interests. For students who are ambivalent about their future, the role of the VSC is to help them not only explore, but to discover different career paths and options. To find out more information and sign up to be notified about other webinars, you can visit our website at www.virtualstudentexperiences.com. But before we begin, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping things, so hang on tight. Firstly, I'm going to be asking our guest professional that I'll introduce in a second a series of base questions so that you can get a good idea of who he is and what he does. And if at any time you think of a question, feel free to post it in the Q&A module on the bottom, and we'll get to it in the later part of the webinar. So, our guest today is Robin Companiano. Mr. Companiano is an experienced business manager and community servant. He served as the president and CEO of AIG Insurance Company, senior advisor at Farmers Insurance Hawaii, and the insurance commissioner in the state of Hawaii, and has also served on numerous charitable boards. He has earned his bachelor's degree in liberal arts at the University of Manoa, as well as a Juris Doctor and MBA. He is currently engaged as director of several for-profit and non-profit organizations, a mentor or advisor to several current and startup businesses, and a consultant to several organizations, and an executive coach to many. And we are very happy to have him here today, and thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Companiano.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I hope I can be of help to you all.
I'm sure we'll have a great hour with you here with us today. So first, just starting, can you tell us about really how you got into business?
Well, let me start with my career, because I'm in a situation where I've had a lot of different experiences through my life. Coming out of school, I practiced as an attorney for about 10 years. And then I had the luxury and the pleasure of serving as a manager in the state, the federal, nonprofit, and the for-profit communities. I became the director of the U.S. Small Business Administration in the Honolulu office. On the state side, I was a state insurance commissioner. On the for-profit side, as Buddy you mentioned, I was the president and chief executive officer of a company called AIG Hawaii Insurance, which later became Farmers Insurance. And on the philanthropic side, Pierre Remediar, the founder of eBay, asked me to set up a private equity firm working on philanthropic projects in Hawaii. So it's hard to say how I got involved with everything. Frankly, I think I'm sort of unique in that I never had to apply for a job. Every job was offered to me, often at a time when I wasn't looking at a job. So I really don't know how to answer that question, how did I get into business? I just happened to be fortunate to be in a situation where I was given all these opportunities.
Awesome. And then your education, since you have a Juris Doctor, you are pretty much a lawyer by trade, as well as you have an MBA. So can you tell us about how vital your education was in terms of your success?
Education, I think, is extremely vital for my success. And I don't think my education has stopped. It keeps on going. But first, I want to tell you, I went to Roosevelt High School. That's the start, the pillar of my educational career. My undergraduate degree at University of Hawaii was in liberal studies. I studied all kinds of things, from modern Japanese male writers to the Filipino language, to the Neolithic studies and art history. So I have a very well-rounded background. And because of that, I had to go get some trade school experience. And that's why I went to law school, which was extremely helpful. But also getting an MBA was extremely helpful as well. Both graduate degrees, I think, helped me in framing my skill set so that I could do just about every job that was offered me. I did also attend a long summer program at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. in public policy. So I dabbled here and there. I also taught graduate and undergraduate classes at Chaminade University as well. So education has been a big part of my life, my career, and I think has given me the opportunity to try a lot of different things in life.
Awesome. And then into your experience a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about your time as the insurance commissioner for the state of Hawaii and what your job was like and what your responsibilities were?
The Being a state insurance commissioner is a fascinating job. There is no federal regulation of insurance, so the states are left on their own. So the state commissioners come together and work as a Congress, if you will, to regulate insurance. Now, the regulation of insurance is basically you want to keep insurance companies healthy, but you don't want them to charge rates that are unaffordable for the public. So you're sort of caught in between the public interests and the interests of the insurance community. It's a very tough road to navigate. Frankly, a regulator's job is very, very tough. But as a state insurance commissioner, you have the responsibility of regulating companies that work with businesses around the world. And how does a small state like Hawaii manage to keep insurance companies honest in the marketplace? That was a fantastic challenge, and I did it for 5 years. Frankly, working with my colleagues throughout the mainland, I ended up being very active in the insurance regulation, not only in Hawaii, but worldwide. I would do crazy things like give keynote speeches in Lloyd's of London, in Tokyo, in New York, in representing the United States as the subject matter expert in negotiations with the European Union, and going to Tokyo and trying to tell the regulators there that Hawaii is a good place to do business. So it was a fascinating blend of regulation, but also economic development, if you will, for Hawaii. That was one of the toughest jobs I've ever had in trying to balance the road between making sure that consumers got the coverage and protection they needed, but also making sure that the insurance industry did a fair job and got fair returns for what they did. It was something that was probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. Yeah.
And from that job, can you tell us about what valuable skills and knowledge and really experiences you took away from that position?
I really put my education to use. I, used a lot of my both legal and my graduate business education to actually do the job. But also there was a big, big sector part of the job that required knowledge of the political process. How do you navigate not only our state legislature, but Congress as well. I testified on Capitol Hill many times on insurance regulation. So learning how to do a job politically, learning the economic aspects of a job, learning how the business aspects fit into it was very, very helpful and helped couch my abilities to do future jobs. It was very, very helpful in that regard.
And then as the president and CEO of AIG, how did your responsibilities change or differ? And really what skills and knowledge overlapped from your job as the insurance commissioner?
What I really liked about government, both both for my role as the head of the Small Business Administration locally and for the insurance division, is that you're working for the public good. At the end of the day, if you do your job, if you work hard, you know that you've done something or you've tried to do something for the people of the state, for the community. Working for a private sector operation, that's not what you're out there for. Theoretically, you're trying to grow wealth for the corporate entity. I mean, that's the purpose of, that's the primary purpose of most businesses, is to accumulate wealth, to make money. So the mission is really different. Working for a company like American International Group, which at the time was probably one of the best, most dynamic insurance companies, financial services companies in the world, was an extreme challenge. I worked for the best. I worked for very demanding managers. I had a very demanding, well-known, internationally known CEO. And so I learned an awful lot about how to run an organization. Now, taking my public career into the private sector was also helpful because I could add a touch of helping the community, to the job. And that's what I really enjoyed about working at a large insurance company in Hawaii. So all of the education, all my prior experience really helped me when I took my longest serving job, that is of a CEO.
And then as CEO, really what mindset and attributes did you have?
Well, I think, let me start here. I think for every job that I've been a manager at, and most of my career has been in running organizations, you start with having a vision. What do you want to do with the job when you set forth? When I took over the job at the Small Business Administration, it was, how do we help small businesses in Hawaii specifically? When I took over the job as insurance commissioner, I told the governor who appointed me, Governor Waihee, here's what I want to do. Here's what I think we have to do. I've got to keep the insurance industry stable. I've got to keep them prosperous, but I also want our community to benefit by fair insurance rates. So that was the vision and mission I had. As the head of AIG, I took over when it was in a very bad financial shape, and I wanted to do something so that it would be prosperous and it would serve the community and also give back to the community. When you start with visions like that, then everything else falls into place. I think having the vision and determining your mission and your goals is what would make you successful in any job, in any sector.
And then you talked a little bit about serving the community in this last question and a couple of the others. So how important is really giving back to the community?
From my perspective, what I think, here's where I come. I've had some wonderful jobs and I've had a lot of great opportunities, but they're only given to me by people who reached out to me and helped me along the way. And the only way I can pay them back is by helping others. How do you help others? Well, I got to think that despite all the problems we have in our country today, this is a great country and this is a great state. And I want to do what I can to help build the state because it's given me an opportunity to thrive, to be successful. It's given me an opportunity to provide for my family. So it's become very important for me to do what I can to help the community. And so I spent a lot of time working on a lot of nonprofit organizations in town and actually throughout the country as well. So it's a very important part of my existence.
And then sounds like you've held many leadership roles. So what are your views on leadership? More specifically, how do you think leaders should lead? And what was the most important thing to keep in mind when you were leading such a large corporation like AIG?
I think that there are a lot of people nowadays, and the term leadership is viewed quite broadly. To me, a leader is one who actually have people follow them, not because of position, not because of authority, not because they got elected to office, but because they prove their worth by doing things. So what do they have to do? You create that vision. You create an atmosphere to succeed. You help others. You nurture them to succeed. And then you go out and with your, and with the best of planning, you do what you said you're going to start out to do. Leadership is a combination of that, encouraging others to follow, encouraging others to do their best. And people sort of sometimes forget that, oh, okay, well, I got this position, therefore I'm leader. No, it's you prove your worth and therefore you are a leader. So it's a slight shift in the dynamic. But I think that's what's governed a lot of my activity. So I've been chairman of or the president of a lot of different organizations in town. Is that true leadership? No, that of itself does not prove my leadership capability. If I am to be judged by my leadership, it's going to be what did I do as a result of it? I have the people that I worked with grown and thrived. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that at just about every organization that I work at, I have subordinates who have gone on to greater and better things. When I left AIG and Farmers, when I retired from that, I was very, very proud that one of my selected employees became the next CEO and went on to greater and better things. When I left Ulupono, some of the people that I had left behind have gone on to greater and better things. And that's absolutely delightful to me. And that's how I think a true leader reacts, by having others grow into leadership positions and to seek fulfillment in some way.
Huh. And then do you have any tips as to how to become a good leader? How to develop those leadership traits and good character?
Okay, I'm going to tell you the first thing that my mom told me and my dad told me when I got my first leadership job. My mom was a secretary, at first in a law firm, and then later on in the military. So she always took the role of the clerical support that I've always had. So wherever I went, my mom would always remind me, don't forget to take care of the people that are around you. Don't forget to take care of them, because they're going to see you on the way up and they're going to see you on the way down. And you have to be consistent no matter where you are. So she would slap my head and tell me, did you take care of your secretary? Are you treating her nice? And as much as I would tell, yeah, mom, I am, that became a very important part of my persona. When I took the job at AIG, I went to my dad's house and I told him, Dad, I was offered the presidency of a company. I'm going to start out at the start of the company. I'm not working my way up. They're offering me the #1 job, yeah, at the top of the company. And he looked at me, he thought about it, and said, well, the only other place you start at the top is when you dig a hole. So be very careful. Well, what do you mean be very careful? He says, remember who you are. And I thought about that, and he didn't say anything else. And I thought, okay, so who am I? Besides being now identified as the head of an organization. Well, I'm a person who believes in trying to help others. I'm a person who believes in working really hard. I'm a person who believes that if we come up with a big strategy and we can achieve it, we can all feel really good about it. And I'm a person who believes we should give back to the community and those who help. And that sort of helped me in setting forth the kind of manager, the kind of leader that I am.
Awesome.
That's my form of leadership, buddy. There are a lot of other people who would treat it different. Military leaders see it primarily as I've got a higher rank. I've earned a higher rank, therefore I'm a leader, and many of them are extremely good leaders. Government leaders, I've been appointed to this position. I've been elected to this position, therefore I'm a leader. So people in leadership roles and different leadership roles treat it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But you heard what I had to say about it.
Yeah.
From my perspective. Yeah.
And then you spoke a little bit about your time with the SBA and how you were able to have the focus and mindset of helping Hawaii small businesses. So can you speak a little bit about your role at the SBA?
SBA was that was a very interesting job. I mean, it's a federal agency that primarily gives loans to smaller businesses, loans that are more risky than a bank would give a loan to. So you're out there trying to help businesses, knowing that you're not going to make all of them succeed, that a good portion of them are not going to succeed. They're going to close their doors. They're going to file foreclosure and bankruptcy and all those terrible things. But every once in a while, you'll have a good company that's going to succeed, and you feel really good about it. So that was sort of an interesting challenge, working with bankers to try to persuade them to take more risks, working with the small business community, knowing that some of them you really want to fulfill their dreams, and knowing that others you're not going to be able to do that. Being a manager in a federal bureaucracy at times is really tough, because you've got this huge bureaucracy centered in Washington, D.C. that regulate the way you are and the way you think. But SBA was, because it's a smaller agency, there was a lot of flexibility, and I think Hawaii took full advantage at the time in trying to be flexible and trying to provide the loans and other small business services. That was fun.
And then after was it an acquisition of AIG?
Oh, yes. So AIG, again, was one of the premier financial services company in the world in 2008. It did sell insurance a lot. It was probably it still is one of the best insurance underwriters in the world. But it did crazy things. It owned the airport of Dubai. It owned one of the major uh, buildings in Makati in Metro Manila. It had one of the most expensive properties in the world in a building outside the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. Its fleet of aircraft, it had an airline leasing company that had the largest fleet of airlines in the world. It owned more airplanes than American, United, and Delta did put together. So it was a massive conglomerate, but it ran into problems in 2009 and it started to sell off its assets. And so the unit that sold auto insurance that I belonged to was eventually sold to Farmers Insurance. Now, as that happened, I realized that the franchise that I had was very valuable. When AIG was sold, when AIG's auto insurance company was sold, the Hawaii operation was a very significant part of it. And we went, we were taken by farmers. With my experience with, my national experience as an insurance commissioner, I happen to know some of the people at Farmers. In fact, the CEO was very happy that I was coming over as part of the acquisition. So after the acquisition, I steered them through the acquisition. I made things work. We did everything. We rebranded ourselves Farmers Insurance, and I could have lived happily ever after. But then somebody from Piero Midiar's office came knocking on my door and said, "Hey, why don't you run this new venture that we're going to start in Hawaii, trying to make Hawaii more self-sufficient by investing in projects dealing with energy and food. So why don't you make Hawaii greater?" And I was like, "Well, do I keep the nice job as a CEO of a large insurance company in Hawaii, or do I try something new, like trying to help make Hawaii great again?" And having had a great career in insurance, I thought, well, let me take a little bit of a gamble and go work for Pierre. So yeah, it was a tough choice, but it's nice to have great choices like that. And so that's why I decided to retire from insurance and move on to the philanthropic world.
Awesome. Can you tell us about, were you one of the creating members or one of the founding members of the Ulupono Initiative?
Yes, I was one of two general partners that started it.
And so can you tell me about how they help the community and how their goals and really values align with your own personal values?
What Ulupona started out to do was make investments in projects that would help Hawaii become self-sufficient. So a lot of our initial investments, like with other venture capital firms, were not successful. We tried to invest in biofuels companies. We tried to invest in farms. I think there's still some outstanding investments, knock on wood, that are going to work. But that's the nature of making investments. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Ulupona also does some grants, and while some of the grants do really good things, they're not going to sustain Ulupono. Pierre's vision was to create an investment firm that becomes self-sufficient. He pours millions of dollars into many organizations such as, like Ulupono, and for many of them, he expects them to be self-sufficient. It's a fascinating model. It's a great model. He doesn't want to keep on pouring money down the drain. And so Ulupona's mission was eventually to become self-sufficient, but also help Hawaii become self-sufficient. Wonderful model. They're still out there. They're still trying. It's a big struggle. I hope that they succeed, but it's not an easy mission for them.
Mm-hmm. And then can you speak a little bit about the impact that you were able to have on the Hawaii community while you were serving with the Ulupona Initiative?
It's hard to say because I look at all the companies, I look at all the organizations that were helped. Some of them are still there. Some of them have given up. Some of them have gone broke. But I think to the extent that the Ulupono Initiative tried to get people to focus on food and energy, that alone is something that will help the community overall. Looking at today, let's bring it forward to today. What do we need to do to come out of this COVID-19 crisis? We need to become more self-sufficient. We need to diversify our economy. And some of the work that Ulupono had done in trying to diversify our economy, in trying to get more more renewable energy on grid, is very important. It's going to help us in the long run.
Hmm. Awesome. And then from working at so many reputable companies, and can you describe to us some of maybe the patterns that you discovered while working at all of those in those top level positions?
I think if I were to look at patterns, uh, companies or organizations that try to do good within the community, but also understand basic economics that become very important. I think organizations that are committed to their goals tend to succeed more than not. I've worked. If you're in the private sector, a lot of private sector people think that people who work in government are lazy, they don't do their job. But a lot of the employees that I work side by side with, that I manage and supervise at both the state and federal sectors, I think were the most sincere and dedicated people I've ever worked with. They worked hard.
Hmm.
But it was because they had a mission. They figured out that they weren't there just to punch the clock and collect their salary at the end of the day. They were there because they thought they were doing some good. They thought that they were making a difference. And when you have organizations that are committed to that, that can find a way to get their employees committed to the idea that they can make a difference no matter what they do, then the organization has a better chance of succeeding. And the employees, everybody that works for the organization, can think that they're doing something to make a better life for everybody. That's a fairly significant thing, very important. I've worked with organizations and I've seen people in the organizations, in which I work, where they're there to punch a clock. They don't really care that much. They don't get excited about the overall mission. Give them the job, they're going to push the paper across the desk and be done with it. And by the way, that could be a state, it could be a federal, that could be a for-profit organization. You see that throughout. So to get everybody committed to good ideals is, I think, the fun part of working for any organization.
Hmm. And then in working for so many different organizations, charitable organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government sector, what were the main differences in working in those different sectors?
Well, again, when you work for government, you're working for the people. For the federal government, it's for the federal taxpayers, literally, and for the state government, it's for state taxpayers. So, and for a private company, it's for the stockholders of that company. For working for Pierre, well, it was his money, so we worked for him. So you do have different reporting lines, and it's important to remember who actually pays your salary, and to understand that you've got to make whoever pays your salary happy.
Hmm. And then
From that comes different expectations and different different desires and the like. But it starts with that.
And then when you serve as maybe the president of a charitable board, how does that differ than serving as the CEO of a giant company?
Well, okay, let's talk about the system of governments. Literally, whatever leadership structure you have reports to a higher authority, normally a board. So the president of the University of Hawaii reports to a board of regents, and I served in the board of regents of both University of Hawaii and Chaminade. The president of an insurance company reports to a board, who, like in most boards, has the decision on whether or not you hire or fire the president. So in that sense, the role of a board in the private sector, in the public sector, in the governmental sector, all have similar governance structures. The missions, again, differ, just as like the mission of the head of an organization will differ, the mission of the board differs. So I think I told you, buddy, offline that I do have a lot of experience. I think if I added up the time that I spent on for-profit boards, nonprofit boards, government boards, trade association boards, federal boards, I have close to 400 years of experience. I don't think I hope I don't look 400 years old, but it does represent a big part of my experience, of my background too. Yeah.
And then maybe I guess if this is too hard to do, then no need, but looking back into those 400 years of culminated experience, what are the most important lessons that you learned from your time?
Oh, focus me a little bit more on that.
Mhm.
What kind of
Um,
lessons are you looking for?
hmm. So maybe something that really opened your eyes or helped you to look towards the future or made you have a moment of intuition.
Okay, let me start this way, and if it let me try this. I don't know how come I got suckered into so many boards, or to suckered into leading all these organizations. And if I were to ask people, well, why did you approach me? And I did ask, why was I offered the job? Why was I recruited to take these positions? The general thing is we heard about you. We saw what you've been working on. You're known as a hard worker. More important to me, you're known as a person of integrity. And we like your action, your visibility. And that's a unifying stream of statements that people have told me when I've been recruited for to serve on a board or to serve on a commission of some type, or work for the government boards like being a regent or working on a stadium authority. So having a good work ethic, I think, helps in you and your colleagues, your future work commitments, your future development is all depending on the kind of person you are.
Hmm. And then what recommendations would you maybe give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in business?
Learn as much as you can. Use between now and the time you get into business on a full-time basis, because I think a lot of you, like you, will be dabbling in business ventures throughout your career, your remaining career as a student. Learn as much as you can. And when I say learn, yeah, I think it's very important to learn basic accounting, basic finance, economics. Learn how the world works from an economic perspective, but also learn about the world without a business lens. As I mentioned, my undergraduate degree was in liberal studies. I never touched a business book until I got into grad school. And I think that was the greatest education I've ever had. When I look back, yeah, I mean, you know, some of the stuff that I've stocked away in my memory may seem irrelevant or trivial. I mean, I love listening to Brindisi from La Traviata. I love looking at Michelangelo's. I can still see Michelangelo's David in Firenze when I was there. Looking at the Golden Pavilion and understanding the history of Kyoto was very important. Understanding how to cognate the word I from Indonesian to Tahitian to Hawaiian was fascinating. What does this have to do with business? Nothing, but yet everything. You see, having that liberal education to learn about humanity, I think, is one of the most important attributes of being a business leader today. Yes, you could come up to the ranks as being the most brilliant accountant, or you can come up through the ranks and try to run things and be the most wonderful attorney. But if you don't have that grounding in arts and sciences and in the humanities, you're nothing. So, as you continue on your academic careers and you focus on business, let's say some of you will no doubt go on to a business school someplace. Good for you, great. But don't forget your undergraduate grounding in the humanities, in English and literature and language and linguistics, in sociology is super important and will help make you a better person in the long run. Please don't forget that.
And then, how important do you think are mentors, and how would you really acquire a good mentor?
Well, there were in my career there are a lot of people I looked up to, and I just modeled them. I never went to anybody and said, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" I was too scared. I was too nervous, but I watched them from afar. And some of those people today I still look upon as people whose careers I follow, whose habits and behavior I follow, and I consider to be mentors. In other senses, a lot of people reached out and helped me without me asking for help. And um, I look upon that with wonder and a lot of gratitude. And I've tried to do the same thing. Recently, I think I'd mentioned, I think there's like 50 or 60 individuals that from time to time want me in some respects to mentor them. And it starts with, hey, Mr. Companiano, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Or can I pick your brain? And it leads on to this and this and this. And certainly when you ask somebody for help, I need your advice, or I want to ask you opinion. People are generally grateful or delighted that you look upon them as someone that can give you some advice. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask someone, can I spend a little time with you? I have some questions to ask you. Maybe you can help me. I need your advice. If you've chosen the right person, they would be sort of delighted. They may say they're too busy, but generally a good mentor will find the time.
Hmm.
So I would encourage you to find people to model your behavior or to help you along the way. I would ask you to actually do that, and try to look upon the models now as you embark upon your perhaps last few years in high school and beginning years in college. Look to the people that you can look to for guidance or for inspiration. Sometimes it's going to be a professor or a teacher. Sometimes it's going to be a family friend that you can just watch out of the corner of your eye and model their behavior. And it could be what to do, but also what not to do. So yeah, I think mentorship and having good role models is extremely important.
And then can you share with us maybe one piece of knowledge that you received from a mentor that's really helped you?
Well, if you go back to my mom, who was a mentor in a sense, who told me to make sure that I treated everybody with respect, that was a good example. For non-related, non-relative mentors, a lot of them was how they treated people, how they operated with integrity. I think that's the greatest takeaway for me, was to be true to yourself, to have good upstanding morals. If you're a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever religion, spiritual background you have, you all have that spiritual guidance about honesty, integrity, morality. I think it's a very important backbone to have in your structure. You don't necessarily learn that in school. You learn that through watching others. You learn that through the spiritual teachings that you may or may not have. But that to me is one of the most important takeaways that you can have.
And can you speak to maybe the importance of networking, and especially in a business setting, and how that's really played a role for you?
Networking is very important. So, okay, when my dad was in the military, in the Air Force, and when we came back to Hawaii, I knew nobody. We were not connected, and the people we knew were all related to military. So I went through high school and college and my beginning years as a professional, having known nobody, literally. Yeah, very small family. Uh, During my time at AIG, I realized, though, many years later, I could walk into the office of any CEO in town, major CEOs in town, and they would know who I am. I knew my way around all of the, educational institutions. I knew my way around Congress. I could walk into any congressman's office in Hawaii, and for many congressional offices not in Hawaii, and I knew people. So how did I grow from having virtually no network to, a much larger network? It was just talking to people, getting to know people, and never realizing where they can come, where they can help you in the future, or where you can help them in the future. Just last week, somebody who I lost track of 10 years ago, 11 years ago, reached out for me and asked me for help. And I sort of didn't realize I'd been a role model for him for 20 years. And all of a sudden he asked me for help, and I was really delighted to be able help him. So you establish networks and patterns that may come handy next week or may come handy next decade. You just never know.
Hmm. And so, I mean, from working at really the highest levels of many different institutions, how did you yourself keep a really healthy work-life balance? And what did you have to sacrifice to become successful?
Buddy, that's a great question. Work-life balance is super important. And I've seen a lot of situations. In fact, I've got one that just happened last year where a young up-and-comer who I've been talking to for about 6 or 7 years. His marriage fell apart because he wasn't spending enough time doing it. Working on his relationship, and that was terrible. He was sacrificing his career for that. People make tough choices, and it's really, really hard. But just so I would ask you all just to understand that you need some kind of balance. You need to work hard, but you also need to play hard as well. I will tell you my personal story, which is kind of tough one. As insurance commissioner, I was going all around the country working on behalf of all the states. And one Saturday morning in Florida, I was sitting in an early morning breakfast with several commissioners, and we're trying to do these earth-shaking changes in regulation, and we were on the cusp of doing something great. So it was like, look, it's almost 7 o'clock. We're all flying home. One guy was going back to Nebraska, another guy to North Dakota, one guy to Philly, and another guy to Washington. I was coming back to Hawaii, and we were talking about where we're going to have dinner Monday night in DC. We're all going to go home. This is Saturday morning, and Monday night we're going to be in DC, which required me to fly home, fly out Sunday night, and meet my friends and colleagues in DC. And we're going to do testimony because Tuesday morning we had to testify on Capitol Hill in front of the U.S. Senate. Well, I got home, and I called my wife from the airport. No cell phones at the time, and I told her, "Hey, I'm on my way home. I got a cab. You have to come pick me up." And cab dropped me in my driveway, and my wife came running out and told me, "Don't come in the driveway. I got a surprise for you." And my 2 kids, who were about 7 and 6 years old at the time, came out of the driveway riding their bicycles, their 2-wheelers. And I said, "How did they take the wheels off?" Because the previous weekend we were still with 2 training wheels on their bikes, and they're driving rings around me. My wife said, "Well, I went to the park, and the custodian helped me teach my kids how to ride a 2-wheeler and took the training wheels off." And I thought, hey, you know what? That's a daddy job. It was my job to teach my kids how to ride the bike. It was my job to take them out to the park on Saturday. Instead, my wife took them out, and the custodian took the role of father to my children. And I thought back, I had left them previous Saturday night. I flew out on a Saturday night, and I still remember them because sitting in the backseat of the car, as I had done many times, waving goodbye as I took a plane off to the mainland. And I thought, okay, well, here I am trying to make a living and trying to do some wonderful things for regulation, and I'm doing Capitol Hill, but here are my kids. Where's the work-life balance? Well, I didn't take the trip to Capitol Hill. I never went back as insurance commissioner. I announced my resignation a week after that because I realized my life was out of kilter. I was one of the most successful commissioners and one of the most prominent commissioners in the country, and also beginning to make a reputation worldwide as an insurance regulator. But I'd forgotten one of the most basic parts of being a human being, and that was being a father. Very painful. And I'm still paying those lessons today. So, take that to heart. Understand that you need a balance. And I think the best way to show that was by sharing a very painful but very serious story with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. Can you look back maybe towards the beginning of your career and tell us what you wish you had known at the beginning?
Oh man, if I knew all the risk I would take and all the trouble I would have gotten into, I don't think I would have gotten out of bed. So, so I don't know. Sometimes I sit with my wife and I think, my gosh, what was I thinking then? That was a really risky move. Why did I do it? What was I thinking? Was I not thinking? So, so my response is, I don't want to look back. Uh, my advice to thine own self be true. Make sure that you set out on your quest with the best of intentions, with a clear heart, clear mind, and with all the honesty and integrity that you can muster. Maybe that's the way to look at it.
Hmm. I was talking to my grandfather because me and my cousin told him that we were going to do an interview with you, and he told me that you are a wine connoisseur. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that and how important it is to have hobbies?
I think that's part of the work-life balance. And yeah, your grandfather and I go way, way back. Um, One of my hobbies was learning how to drink wine, and so over time, I took a test as a sommelier. So I am, I do have some background in that. At one point, I had over 3,000 bottles in my cellar with a bunch more on order. And I remember coming to a realization, hey, wait a minute. If I drink a bottle a week, I'm going to be 115 by the time I finish all these bottles. So maybe I got to do something about it. That was more of being a collector than being someone who appreciated wine. So I went off the deep end a little bit on wine collection. I know people with 8,000, 10,000 bottle collections that live with their nose in a wine glass. I've sort of had to step away from that a little bit because it can be a very expensive hobby, but it is still a very good hobby to have.
Hmm. Um, and then now in the situation that we've been facing for the past maybe 6 to 7 months with the coronavirus, how has that really affected you and the trajectory of your career and your goals?
I found myself, because where I am now is I've been a counselor and mentor. You mentioned a little bit about my resume. I help business and other organizations. I currently have desks in 4 businesses throughout town, and I flit from business to business and help them. So I spent a lot of time on trying to help them understand what it'll take in the post-COVID environment. What's the new normal? What are they going to be faced with? In addition to those 4 businesses, I do have a handful of other businesses that I handle, and some of the boards I sit on, and some of the people I mentor. So everybody's clamoring for, what am I going to do next? What's life going to look like next year? So I spend my days trying to help these organizations, these individuals, try to figure out how to reform their expectations, how to reform their operations. Some of them will thrive. Some of them can pivot and become very valuable and find ways to sell a product that they can sell. Some of them will have to, unfortunately, go under. They're not going to make it. They're just not. So it really differs. I mean, we do have some challenges as a state, as a country, as a world, but I'm focusing on the businesses I help, mostly in Honolulu, and it's been a lot of busy work, and we're trying to guess what the future is and trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to look like as a community 6 months from now, 6 years from now? And that's been the challenge. That's what's been keeping me busy 7 days a week now.
And would you be able to speak to some of those major changes that you see coming?
Oh, because okay, so we're not going to see as many tourists. We're going to see a lot more people unemployed. We're going to see continued decline in business and restaurants and hotels. By the end of the year, I suspect, based on what we see, Waikiki, Lahaina, Kona will suffer tremendously. We're going to see massive unemployment still. We have about 210, 220,000 people unemployed now. And even by starting up the airlines flying in, we will still have about 120,000 people unemployed by the end of the year. Going into 2021, we're still going to see that. I think a lot of you and your colleagues are going to have a hard time trying to figure out if you really want to spend some time going to a mainland institution of higher education. A lot of schools and colleges are going to go to a virtual classroom. You can do that part-time, but I think part of the enriching environment of higher education is getting to talk story and getting to interrelate with people your own age, and that's going to be sorely lacking. So will you find more opportunities attending an institution of a higher education locally? um, Maybe your parents are going to have a harder time affording it. So I think that's going to be a big change for you all. I think professors, your better professors tend to be older, and a lot of them are not going to be happy to go back into the classroom. You're going to have not the good experience in having your top professors see you eye to eye across from a table or in a lecture hall. You're going to see them through a Zoom conference, and you're gonna lose out a lot for that. So we're looking at how do you reform your situation like that? How do you really get the value of interaction, social interaction, as a student if you can't see face to face? That's replicated by what's going to happen in the business community. Some businesses, yeah, you can work remotely, you can work through Zoom, but there's a lot of businesses that require face-to-face interaction. You're not going to see that. And the major part of Hawaii's economy, which is retail operations, tourist operations, we're going to suffer. We're going to suffer for many, many years. And watching what's happening on a national level, on an international level, for that matter, I'd be hard pressed. I wouldn't want to be in a car rental business, an airline business, in a hotel business, or any business associated with that, because it's going to be really tough. So how do you pivot? How do you sell product? How do you provide services that would allow you to stay alive and thrive? And that's a challenge that everybody's facing now.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for answering our baseline questions. Now we're going to switch over to the questions that the students had. The first of which is, what did your day-to-day life routine look like, or used to look like?
My day-to-day
Routine.
Oh gosh, for all my jobs, it's waking up, sometimes working out at the club, taking yoga and the like, and spending anywhere from 8 to, let's say, 11 hours at work, coming home, doing my chores, and spending anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours at night in preparation for the next day. So the work, if you're talking about work, a time dedicated to work, no matter what job I was at in my legal or management career, it was probably at least 10 to 12 hours a day if I could. 50 to 60-hour work weeks were light work weeks for me. They still are.
Hmm. And then the second question is, what mindset do you have to have in order to be able to learn every single day?
Well, I've never seen myself as the smartest person, the most talented person. I was never the most athletic person. I never had flaming good looks or confidence that I could attract every girl that I fell in love with. So having that mindset that I could always do more, I could always learn more, really helped. I was never the smartest kid on the block. There's always somebody smarter than me. There's someone always more talented than me. So having a little bit of humility and understanding that, well, I'm never going to be the best, but I'm just going to try within my own capabilities. Oh, and by the way, if I learn a little bit more, maybe I can be better. Having that type of attitude really helped me.
And then just another question from me. Do you have any book suggestions or any movie suggestions?
Oh gosh. I'm a prolific reader, but I read everything from travel to baseball. I love baseball. The story of baseball, the history of baseball. I read a lot of war stuff, war stories, historical stuff, because it teaches me strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So at any given moment, I will have anywhere from 4 to 6 books on my shelf, and I'll read them and I'll put them down, read them and put them down. And I've done this for 30 years. So I've read thousands of books in my lifetime. Some of it just to escape. I do not necessarily read books on how to become a better CEO, because you don't get to be a CEO by reading a $39 book. You learn it through experience. So being a prolific reader is great. On movies and the like, I mean, right now, I have to watch what my wife is watching, and so we're on Korean dramas a lot. We do have individual Netflix accounts, but I frankly would rather read a book than go on Netflix right now. But there are times when I just want to escape, so I'll watch movies, whatever.
And then next question from our audience is, what age or point in your career/education did you look to find a mentor?
Oh, probably when I was 11, and every year after that. Again, I use mentor in a broader sense, someone that I can look up to and model. Not someone who could give me advice like an advisor, because I was generally too shy, or I could never find anybody that could really fit the bill like that. But I would always find people that I could look up to and see part of what I wanted to be in their behavior. Sort of like a sports hero. I mean, I used to like Mickey Mantle all the way to Tiger Woods, not knowing I'm not going to be the best ball player or golfer, but I look to parts of their habits, their personam that I liked. I love their dedication, their fierce concentration, their mission. How they start with strong mission, with mission. There are a lot of other mentors I look to because of their values. So I watch people in that sense. But I would encourage all of you to find people close to you. Like I said, it could be a relative, it could be your father's friend, or people you see in the news, and watch their behavior. Maybe you get to know them, or reach out to them, or find a way to talk to them. The more opportunities you have, the better.
Yeah, for sure. And then last question from our audience, what were the biggest challenge you have faced, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Buddy, I've had so many challenges, both in terms of what the job called for, but in terms for personal challenges as well. I think the best thing I can say is that if you walk into any situation with a clear mind and conscience, with all the honesty and integrity you can muster, that'll prepare you for any challenge. You're not going to succeed in all of them. Yeah, I've made mistakes in my life, big flaming blow up mistakes, but I've also had my share of successes too. But I try to approach them the same way.
Awesome. Well, all right. Thank you very much, Mr. Companiano, for joining us today and really sharing your knowledge and experiences and even time with us. And we appreciate it here at Virtual Student Experiences. And I'm sure the students who will view this later will be grateful for what you've shared with us here today. And just for the students, just to let you know, we have another webinar scheduled for this coming Thursday at 10 a.m. HST. And if you'd like to be notified about future VSE webinars, you can sign up on virtualstudentexperiences.com. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And have a nice day. Thank you.